Hi, Dr. Newman. This is my practice video for the value debate. I'm the first negative constructive speaker. Okay. We say that slavery has vanished from European civilization, but this is not true. Slavery still exists, but now it applies only to women, and its name is prostitution. That's a quote from Victor Hugo. We negate that the United States ought to legalize adult sex work. We define United States as all 50 states and territories, legalize as codified into law, adult as any person over the age of 18, and sex work as any employment that involves sexual actions for money, in addition to the management and oversight of that work. Our value is safety, and the value criteria is that the U.S. should ensure its people are free from all manner of threats. First, I will refute the opposition's two arguments, and then I will present my two arguments. Okay, and then I will refute. And then on to my first argument is that sex work is deadly. Sex work is deadly and unsafe and should not be legalized in the United States. The legalization of adult sex work in the United States is unsafe and deadly to workers. Causes of death include murder, sexually transmitted diseases, drug overdose, physical exhaustion, and abuse. When a client purchases a section with a sex worker, they are free to do whatever they want with them for the purchased amount of time. Pimps, or the people managing these workers, couldn't care less about their health and safety, because to them they are merely a body to be bought and sold. Oftentimes, pimps are the ones themselves abusing the workers. These pimps have no regard for the human being that they are submitting to trauma, enabling physical abuse, overwork, and death. According to the University of Leicester, sex workers are 18 times more likely to be murdered than the general population in Colorado Springs, USA, and 60 to 120 more times more likely to be murdered in Vancouver, Canada. Most homicides are work-related when the sex worker is murdered by a client in a sex-working workplace or last seen alive at a sex-working street. Sex workers are a particularly vulnerable population because of their position in society. In the UK, sex work is the job with the greatest risk of occupational homicide. According to the American Journal of Epidemiology, prostituted persons are most likely women and face exceptional risks of murder and violence by the hands of male sex buyers. Most sex workers are female and low income, while most buyers are male with a full-time job and college degree. According to the New Zealand Prostitution Law Review, legalization could do little about violence that occurred during adult sex work. Sex work should remain illegal in the United States in order to protect the lives of sex workers and decrease physical harm and homicide. Legalizing adult sex work would be extremely detrimental to the safety of the workers, and legalizing would open the industry to inflation of workers, leading to increased homicide and death. And then my second argument is human trafficking. Legalization of adult sex work within the U.S. would cause a significant increase in human trafficking, creating a facade of legitimacy that would allow the industry to thrive. If sex work were to be legalized, it would result in a large number of sex workers moving to the legal side, leaving the underground market wide open for an influx of sex workers, resulting in increased human trafficking. This inflation of the market leads to more people being trafficked, as there is now a higher demand, resulting in more abuse, kidnappings, and death, which are all devastating to the safety of these people. Legalization was also open up the potential for human traffickers to supply brothels or sex workplaces under a facade of legitimacy, because what they are doing would look legal at the surface. In other words, the law would be enabling human trafficking. And then I have one case where... So an example of how sex trafficking can operate behind a veil of legalized prostitution is the so-called Sneap case, in which German pimps traveled across the border to the Netherlands and took over large parts of the red light district in Amsterdam, using intimate relationships and brutal violence to coerce women to sell sex and hand over their profits. And then my closing statement: the idea that legalizing or decriminalizing commercial sex would reduce its harms is a persistent myth. Many claim if the sex trade were legal, regulated, and treated like any other profession, it would be safer, but research suggests otherwise. Countries that have legalized or decriminalized commercial sex often experience a surge in human trafficking, pimping, and other related crimes. Okay, I need to cut out some of this stuff.